So today we are here with Mondo Gonzales, who you all know already, to discuss the recent development between President Trump and Benjamin Netanyahu. Mondo, thank you so much for being here.
It's
I reached out to you. I think we were all surprised, to say the least, right, by the president's remarks this week, saying that the U.S. would take over Gaza and move all the residents to other nations, red flag, right, in order to turn the area into a Middle East Riviera. What do you think about this?
well, it's when we say surprised, we could say there's a lot of ways. I look at it as there's some good things about what was said. There's some challenging things about what was said, and there's also the reality of what was said, and also the getting behind the person. I mean, I don't read anybody's hearts, but getting behind the idea of who is Trump, what's his patterns, what's he's done in his life. Does he really mean this? Is it like his book, The Art of the Deal? So there's a lot of ways to look at it. The question comes up often. Is this biblical? A lot of people are quoting Zephaniah chapter 2, which talks about Gaza specifically being forsaken and abandoned. And I think it would be important to touch on that in order just to ground us in those who are prophecy watchers. You know, we watch, but also the caution that's needed in order to interpret the Bible correctly and in its context. So that's kind of the overall view, I think, of how we can approach it.
I like what you said. I think a lot of people have forgotten to be cautious when interpreting scripture. It's one of the biggest problems we have within the church, I think. And this is why I wanted to speak with you about this, because if we look at his policies, okay, some of the policies, or maybe most of the policies, have been greatly beneficial for America. I think we needed reform. We all know that. There's so much corruption going on. And his firm stand, okay, he promised and he has began to deliver regarding the border security, cleaning the government corruption, cutting spending, the transgender policies, the tariff implementation, and his dream, let's call it that, of purchasing Greenland, the annexation of Canada, which is like, where did that come from?
Uh-huh.
The Panama Canal, but Gaza? Tell me what you think about this. I
Yeah.
mean, it's
So I think let's start with the surprise. If you watch the news report, or even their event together, I'm trying to think of the word, their press conference. You could see that Netanyahu. I'm not saying this is the first that he heard of it right at that moment, but there's no doubt that this was the first that he heard of it in the sense of, like, yeah, we haven't had time to really digest all this. Now, so I think what Trump is doing, let's talk about the good things. The first thing that he's doing is he's an outsider, right? He really is not a politician. He's not a historian. I mean, he's a businessman.
yeah.
So in that regard, he as a successful businessman, and I mean, I've ran several businesses before in ministries and pastors. So when you look at something, you go, well, if there's a problem, let's fix it. That it really is, let's fix the problem. And then you also look, and if you come into a situation where maybe somebody else has attempted to fix a problem, and you go, well, we're not going to continue to do it that way. Why? That's dumb. I mean, you know, the phrase, the colloquialism, the definition of insanity is doing the same thing and expecting a different result. So
Correct.
Trump is coming in going, okay, well, all of these other things have failed, so we are going to approach it differently. So in that regard, then his negotiating mind comes in, and he throws out, as is typical, if you're going to negotiate for a car, and you ask 10,000, but you're really willing to settle for 8, but you ask for 10 just to see what you can get. You go high, and well, they come in at 6, and you end up meeting in the middle. So that is the way Trump lives, breathes, dreams, everything. Okay, so if people can see that he's throwing out the most ludicrous, in many ways ridiculous idea that move these people now. So he's thinking, look, Hamas cannot be there. He didn't say that the Palestinians couldn't return, and he also didn't say that he's being accused. People don't listen. He never said that they would be forced off the land. Now, granted, ultimately, he comes out, and I would say that Trump is he's relatively naive of Islam. He's naive of the history of the area. He's naive of thinking of, going back to the entire Palestinian issue, going back even before 1948, understanding immigration, going all the way back to the early 1900s when Jews were immigrating into Israel, even before in the late 1800s. So how much does he know of all that history? I'm not sure, but he's thinking, well, whatever we do, we got to do something different. So the idea of his idea was to have the Palestinians voluntarily leave. See, let's just get to it. He does not understand Islam. He doesn't understand that they have trained their children from the time they're young to hate Jews, to kill Jews at any moment. It's in their religion. It's in their DNA from the time that they're young. And so he's thinking, like an American would, a person of the West. Because if you go to an area, let's say you went to Detroit, and you go, hey, you guys are living in the slums or whatever. How about we'll do this? We're going to bring it all to the ground, but I'm going to send you over to Ohio. We're going to get you a nice place to live. You can live in the suburbs. And then while we rebuild this, if you ever want to come back, you can come back. The American would be like, I'll take that. That's the
Let's do
American
it.
dream, right?
Yeah.
But those people don't care about the
No,
American dream or economics. And
that's
so
right.
when he puts this out there for them, he's thinking, well, why wouldn't anybody want this? They could go live in all these different countries, will provide for it. So, I mean, that's the first area of being naive. And then the second thing is the Islamic theology. I mean, the theology is there. And we also, and the terrorism that's there. And let me just say this, and I'll wrap it up, is that this is why, look, there is a Palestinian state that was established back in after the World War I. It's called Jordan. Okay. And then we see that, and it was, as we know, Jordan was part of you have Transjordan and you have Cisjordan. You have both sides of the Jordan River.
Right.
And so it was established for that reason. But if you look now, the Jordanian government, the Hashemite kingdom, they kicked the Palestinians, Yasser Arafat and others out because why? They're terrorists. And so they come over, and this is why Jordan doesn't want them, Egypt doesn't want them, Syria doesn't want them, Saudi Arabia doesn't want them, Lebanon. Nobody wants this group because they've shown themselves to be, and I'm speaking generally, Hamas, but it's a big portion, and there might be a few civilians that aren't of this mindset, but there's not a lot. But they've caused the Muslim Brotherhood terrorism in Egypt. Even you have Egyptians going, hey, don't send them here. We don't want them here because, again, they've caused trouble in the past, and we don't want that again. This radicalized, very radicalized view. So this is what Trump doesn't understand, is that even the idea of them voluntarily going somewhere, people aren't, they're going to see it's like a fire spreading to that radical Islam spreading. No country wants that.
No, I agree. I think is ignoring the reality of a generational hatred. And this is the word of God teaches that this has been going on since the very beginning. Let's face it, Gaza was a beautiful place at one point, and then they were filled with trees and they have the ocean and all of this. And then when Israel withdrew in 05, they stepped in and they destroyed everything. Now, would Hamas have a change of heart because Gaza is a Middle East Riviera? Because now they have job opportunities and a stable economy and they have tourism? I don't think so. Do you?
It's not about money.
That's
if you
right.
look at Yinwar, all the other Hamas people living in Qatar, they're worth billions, billions. I mean, I'm not worth millions. I'm not even worth hundreds of thousands. Okay, so these terrorists, it's not about money for especially the terrorist leaders and others. We know billions and billions and billions of dollars have been poured in. We also look, as you mentioned, in '05, um, the Jews, the Israeli government under Ariel Sharon removed physically, dragged Jewish people out of their homes. And they unilaterally stepped back and said, okay, we're going to try this land for peace deal. Boom, here it is. 2 years later, the people living there vote Hamas in. Okay, now Hamas's charter, people can read it. They are not compromisers. They have one goal, and that's the eradication of all Jews anywhere in the land. So that has not changed. The Hamas charter, it had some modifications, but that is not, was not removed. That's still their goal. So right out of the gate, you look at the people now, the civilians, many civilians participated in October 7th. The polls that come out are that if let's say you went in there and you had the United Nations, which isn't really legitimate anyway, doing a new poll, many of them would vote Hamas right back in.
Oh,
They would vote him right back in. Now, it's interesting too that there are those, you see some videos of people who are protesting against Hamas, and
mm-hmm.
they end up dead 2 weeks
Yeah,
later.
yeah.
I mean, this group they're barbarians. And so this is why, and they're not shy about it. This is why, again, they will put babies in ovens, back on October 7th, they'll kidnap babies, who have died and other things. So what Trump is simply thinking in this very narrow American Western mentality without understanding. Now, again, he gets credit, and this is what Netanyahu said is, well, it's good to think outside the box.
Oh, yeah. It's very beneficial for them. Come and
Yep.
solve my problem. I don't
Come
have
and
to
say,
deal
yeah,
with these people anymore.
you get in and you be the buffer now, and you deal with the problem that we've been dealing with, since before the founding of Israel. So Netanyahu isn't going to embrace that, even though not fully, but he would be glad to hand this over to somebody else to have them deal with it.
It's your headache now.
Yep.
And let's face it, these people, it's not enough to have a two-state solution.
Mm-mm.
In my opinion, that's a mirage. Yeah, I'm
Yep.
gonna go for it. No, we know better.
They
Uh,
won't.
it's not enough to have half of Jerusalem, to have it split in half, or to have all of it for that matter. They want to annihilate Israel,
Yeah.
period.
Yeah.
So uh, Netanyahu said that the Saudis can create a Palestinian state, that they have enough land. But I think they're forgetting that everybody else, like, for example, China, Russia, UK, Turkey, France, Germany, Spain, they've all come out and said, we don't agree with this.
Yep.
And what are we going to do with international law? What are we going to do with the UN? I mean, to navigate around all of this is going to be very problematic for the US. And I think we have enough issues to deal with and enough things to fix on our turf, right?
Yeah.
To force them out, it's illegal.
Yep.
Nobody wants them, like you said before. Where would they go? To a refugee camp? Bypass all these people so that we can have the Middle East Riviera? It's like you made a deal with a bank to take over my home and you bypassed me and you're
Mm-hmm.
not worried about me. You're saying, oh, yeah, you're going to go live somewhere else. But in the meantime, these people have been fighting over this land for forever. They've been at war with Israel forever. It's something that's inside their DNA. It's
Yeah.
their ideology.
Yeah.
So when I heard this, I just couldn't stop thinking about it and saying, this sounds to me a little crazy, unrealistic, uh,
Unrealistic.
right? Unrealistic. And we don't need this type of pressure right now. And for him to come back and say, look, we're not going to have any soldiers over there. We're going to take over this portion after the war. Tell me what you think about that.
Yeah. I think if, well, let me say it this way. If going back to the art of the deal, okay, because that's just Trump's mindset. We got to, it's like later, we could talk about Zephaniah too, but it's like context. There is a context here. The context here is Donald Trump, right? And you got to get into his brain, just like you get into the brain of the original author of the Bible. Who was he talking to? Who's his audience? What was the time period? So, what was he like? What was he after? What problem was he addressing? Okay, so when you get into the brain of Donald Trump, as far as we can, he's thinking, okay, again, going back to the analogy of the car. So, if I go out there and he'd say, hey, I got this car, whatever, I want $10,000, and somebody walks up and hands me 10,000, think, wow, that was unrealistic. But somebody gave it to me. Wow, I'm not going to complain.
Exactly.
So in the same way, he's throwing out this unrealistic dream. What are the chances of it happening? Zero. I mean, zero. As you mentioned, all of it. I mean, again, to his credit, he said there's been no troops. We're not forcing anybody. But again, it's predicated on they're going to want to leave. And that so right out of the gate, they're not going to want to leave. End of the story. It's over. So they're never going to force it because that is, again, that is international law. And again, with no troops to for again, Trump's throwing this out there, I think, to bring people to the table. He's getting a reaction now. And I think that's what he ultimately wanted was me coming out and say, hey, I got this car for sale. I want 2.5 million. You're gonna be like, what are you're ridiculous. And I go, I got you to the table.
That's
Now
true.
we're talking. I started a conversation, didn't I? You responded. And so this is him. This is him. And so I don't think for 1 minute that this is ever going to happen. I don't think he believes it's ever going to happen. But what did it do? All of a sudden now everybody is looking at this. As you listed all the countries,
And trying to
and they're
figure
going,
out.
they're going, whoa, whoa, they're reacting. They're reacting against it. And then, so he's bringing people now back to the conversation. He throws out the $2.5 million, a car idea, and everybody's saying how stupid it is. And he's like, yeah, I know. But here we are. And so Saudi Arabia is coming, of course. Saudi Arabia, they're very tricky in that they give a public. They always give a public, all of the nations, all the surrounding Arab countries, the Arab League, they always give a public persona about, we care about the Palestinians, Palestinian state. But behind the scenes, they go, we don't really care. So we just have to say this publicly. But yes, we're willing to come, like, for example, before October 7th, which I think is one of the main reasons October 7th happened,
Mm-hmm.
is Saudi Arabia was coming to the table. They were coming to the table they used to say, we require a Palestinian state, a two-state solution before we become a normalized relationship with Israel. But with MBS, Mohammed bin Salman, the young prince, or the younger prince, he doesn't care about that. They don't care about the Palestinians. Again, these are terrorists in their own minds. So behind the closed doors, he's like, we're willing to do it. So then Hamas attacked. And of course, they knew Israel was going to respond. And of course, publicly, then you have to bring sympathy now because Israel's going in there and taking care of business. And there is collateral damage. There are innocent people being killed. There are civilians, even though we know that Israel's unlike most countries of the world in that they deliberately try. Which other country hands out flyers? I don't see Putin putting out flyers,
That's
you
right.
know, in the Ukrainian language saying, hey, so Israel's not perfect, but they are trying to do things in a way that's different. So, but nevertheless, they knew there was going to be, Hamas knew there was going to be innocent people. In fact, as we know, what does Hamas do? They put their children in front. They put their women in front as shields.
Yeah.
They're a bunch of cowards in that way.
Yeah.
They put it in hospitals and kindergartens. So they do this intentionally because they don't get, again, this is the thing. Hamas does not care about their people. In fact, you have now with the aid trucks coming in, thousands of aid trucks, there is no famine going on there. If there's a famine going on in Gaza, it's because of Hamas. And you see, for example, people who are very desperate civilians going to these trucks, and Hamas kills them because these people simply wanted to have food off the humanitarian trucks that were meant for them, not Hamas, because Hamas is confiscating this stuff. And so they don't care about their people in that regard. And so this is where you have all these other things going on. But at the end of the day, this is going to go nowhere. But it's going to bring people to the table. It's going to bring the conversation back. It'll be interesting to see exactly how it plays out because Trump, and I think Trump is correct in this, Trump has been very clear that, as you mentioned, after the war, and Trump said, we're not putting our soldiers there, but they are going to give full ability for Israel to achieve the goal of removing Hamas. Hamas will not be in leadership. They will not be. Now, this is the unfortunate thing. Hamas has been recruiting ever since the ceasefire. They've been recruiting more people. So because they got money, see, they got money.
They have
They're not poor.
resources.
Yep.
No.
They're getting money. Now, here's the thing. So let's say 50% of the Palestinians, there's 2 million people there, 50% of them join Hamas. 50% are going to be eliminated.
That's
But
right.
that's on them for joining in to a organization that is unapologetically, we will kill every Jew, every baby Jew at any moment, and we've already demonstrated it. This is the nightmare of the situation.